So who's got computer 15?
Oh, I do.
It's working all right.
So he thinks.
Yep, so far.
I got it pumping.
What about those two computers up there? Are those on the?
That's start go button. If it just dies.
This?
Yeah,
Turn that on, or it's already
It's
recording.
going now, yeah.
Will do.
If it
I'll
dies,
monitor.
the next class I'll remember to bring in the
The plug.
yeah, I had it, but I mean, the battery should last, 4 or 5 hours.
I wish.
Deciding where you're gonna donate?
About 6:30 class?
What's that?
6:30?
Yeah, this is a building information modeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in this class?
Yeah.
Oh, what's your name?
Alexander?
Okay. Were you here the first day?
Yeah.
Oh, you were? Okay.
No, my second time.
Okay. Great. So this is the first time you?
Yeah.
Okay. You might want to stay after class a little bit so I can bring you up to speed on what we went over last.
I'm trying to figure out how to change the screen brightness. It's not working.
Yeah. So anyway, find a computer and log in on the Windows side. Get started here in a couple minutes.
You guys totally made it though. I told them you were saving lives. It took so long.
If we had Revit 2011 on our computer, should we download 2012 instead of
Revit 2011 is very similar. You can do all the same things, but with Revit 2012, there's some enhanced features, and all the files that we're using are going to be in 2012 version.
So would I have to save
So
down?
you can't. Well, you can't save down.
Oh, you can't?
No, I'm gonna need to go over that.
Because
How's it going? Get any computer.
But good to know,
Looks like
because I
there's one
have
up there.
2011 on my computer from where we did the workshop last year. So I need to download. I don't know if I'll even use my computer or not, but. Once I just go over the two things.
It looks like everybody's here, so
No, I think it's
get started. A couple of things I just want to go over before we jump into Revit today is, and I'm not sure if everyone realizes this, but if you're a student, you can go to Autodesk Education Community. So you can go to this website. It's actually students.autodesk.com, and there's a link here for free software. Autodesk offers all of their software for free to students. So if you have your own laptop or desktop computer, I would recommend that you download as many of these programs as you can, because they actually give you, I think it's about 4 years, a 4-year license on most of the software. So even if you're graduating, it's not going to expire until maybe 4 years from now. The other thing is, if you go to this website, be sure to download Autodesk Revit Architecture, the 2012 version. Some of you might have 2011 on your computer, and all I'm going to say is that everything that we're doing here in the lab is on 2012, and Revit is one of those softwares where if you open up a 2012 project and you save it as a 2012, you can't ever save it down. You can't go backwards in time. You can't go to 2010 and you can't save down to 2009. Kind of like you can in AutoCAD, you can always save down to version 2000 if you wanted to. The reason for that is with each upgrade in Revit, there's so much information that's in all of these files, and they change a lot of the programming and the formatting from each version. So if you were to try to, even if it was possible to go from 2012 to 2009, you'd probably lose a lot of information. So the same thing to keep in mind is if you're on version 2011 and you happen to work on a model and then you bring it into the lab, and all the lab computers have 2012, it's going to automatically upgrade that file to the 2012 version, and then you're never going to be able to get it back to 2011. So just be aware of that. It gets a little complicated when you work in an office because you got to make sure that everyone who's, when you're working with all your different engineers, your structural and your mechanical, everyone is on the same version of Revit. so that you can share files. So anyway, that's a possibility, and I'm going to have to say that I see a lot of you have laptops here, which is good. What we're going to need to do throughout this semester, because this is a full class, and I tried all throughout last semester to make sure that all these computers were up and running, and all I can do is basically email the IT guys and say, make sure it's up and running. There's always at least one computer in here that seems to not be working, or there might be at times 2 or 3. So if some of you can actually bring a laptop and have your Autodesk Revit 2012 loaded on it, just in case, so that everyone can have a computer and follow along. Next item is on the class website. I did upload under classes the information that we went over on class 1. So if you want a refresher, it's not exact word by word, but it's a good summary of everything that we went over. So I kind of have some talking points next to each of these slides, and you can click on the slides and enlarge them if you want to. And then I also provided a little bit of additional information of some of the things that we're going to go over today. And then of course there's class 2, which I'll talk about later today. And then when it comes to uploading your class assignments, all of you should have received a confirmation email. So whenever you type in whatever email address you typed into the file upload center, you should have gotten an email that comes back that basically says, your name, what file was uploaded, what the file size was, and then there's a link that says stored in student folder, and it has this very long hyperlink. If you were to click on that hyperlink in that email, it'll take you to that folder where you've uploaded this information. So if you want to check and verify that your files got uploaded, because there might be problems from time to time about just the script for file uploading, so you can always come back here and check to make sure your file ends up in this directory. If it shows up here, then that means I've received it. Okay. All right, so today we're going to go over the Revit interface, and I'm not going to go over every aspect of it because Revit, there's basically 3 or 4 different interfaces within Revit. And so I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of how you need to understand the Revit platform itself, and then we're going to get into the conceptual massing environment, which is just one little piece of Revit. Has any of you in any of past classes used Vasari? Mm-hmm. Everyone's used Vasari? What class was that for?
BSI.
BSI. So did you guys do any modeling, actual modeling in it, or you just did the...
just like blocks.
Okay. Well, Vasari is exactly the conceptual massing environment of Revit. Project Vasari was actually created to get people to start using Revit and not have to have the whole entire software package, because if you remember, Vasari ran on its own little exe file that you could run on even a USB stick if you wanted to. And so really Vasari was set up to be the conceptual massing environment, so everything that we're actually going to be going over today you might find very familiar. And so when we get into the conceptual mass environment, you'll probably start to notice some very similar commands and basically all the same things that you're probably doing with Vasari. So that might be a plus, but we'll be using it probably in a slightly different way. For now, to find Revit, I think everyone knows this, but if you go into your Start button on the Windows side, All Programs, and it's under Autodesk, and towards the bottom here, Revit Architecture 2012, and you want to make sure you're opening Revit Architecture 2012 and not the viewer. If you open up the viewer, especially if you open up one of your models, you're not going to be able to save your work. It's literally just a viewer so that somebody could actually view your work and kind of move around in the model, but it's not made for any kind of additional changes and so forth. So let's go ahead and click on Revit 2012, and the first thing that will pop up is your splash screen, and then some of you might get prompted with this thing that says, do you want to participate in Autodesk feedback? I always hit no thanks because I don't want to get more information from them. And I don't know why this is taking so long, but And once this also opens up, all of you have it open already, there's a splash screen that basically looks like you've got projects at the top. Yeah, here's this thing. Always click on no thanks. So this is kind of your recent files interface, and this will always be the first screen that pops up. And if you're on your own computer, and not necessarily here on the network, but if you had your own computer, you would start to get additional thumbnails on each of these projects and families as you began to save work on the C drive or whatever computer you're working on. You would start to see your projects kind of start to go up from the left to the right. So it's kind of a quick link to any of your work, your recent work. Revit is divided into two parts. You've got the project environment and you have the family environment. The project environment is essentially the main environment where you will work and have all of the tools available to you to create a project model, your drawing sheets, everything that's associated with BIM. The family environment, you could think of this as a component library, kind of like in SketchUp, or if you work with AutoCAD or Rhino, it'd be like saving a bunch of blocks somewhere on the C drive. Essentially, families are individual components that they can be parametric, they can be 3D, they can be 2D, they can be any kind of shape, form, or whatever. That these end up getting loaded into the project environment, and then you pick and choose and kind of place those objects within your model. In the conceptual design phase, however, the new conceptual mass, where you see this little link down here under families, that is the family environment that we'll be working in. And it's actually a pretty diverse environment in that we can build anything within the conceptual mass environment and then eventually load it into a project and then apply different components like roofs and floors and walls onto the conceptual mass and make any kind of shape and model that we'd like. First thing I'm going to do, let's just open a new project, just so you can see what it looks like. We're not going to be working in this environment at the moment, but I just this will start to introduce you a little bit to the interface. When you first load up Revit, you'll have these two screens off to the left. There's a properties and a project browser. Because of screen size and the common use of both of these dialog boxes, I will always take your left mouse button and drag one of these off to the side. So when I'm teaching, I'll always have the properties bar on the left and the project browser on the right. And it's just kind of a better way of working anyway, because as you work, this project browser will continuously get bigger and larger. And then also your properties bar, there'll be always, depending on what command you're in, you'll have a whole set of parameters and selections that are available on this side. So having those two little windows makes for a very inefficient way of working. But in the project environment, you see all these different tabs up the top and your ribbon tool interface, like you see on most programs nowadays. The Home tab is where you find most of your common tools for the Revit architecture. If you are in Revit Structure or Revit MEP, you would have under the Home tab a whole nother set of tools. So the Home tab is always associated with the particular Revit that you're in. And this is where you'll find where you can start building walls, doors, windows, and all those things that I told you you never want to start with, just because they are pretty blocky, and we're trying to get to a point where we can start to build some very complex items and then start to get into the project environment. I'm not going to go over all of these items, but if you click on each of these tabs, it'll switch to, every single time your tool ribbon will change to a whole other set of tools that are available. Also, you might want to turn down the sound on all of your computers, because when we start working, we might run into errors and we'll get a couple beeps here and there. So you can kind of click around there. Every now and then if you hover over any tool, it'll give a little toolbar pop-up that'll say what this tool does. It'll also give you a set of initials that are in parentheses. Those are the shortcut keys. Basically in Revit, everything's a two-letter shortcut. So if you were to type in AL, you don't have to press them at the same time, just one after another, you would get this particular command to pop up. We'll be using shortcut keys from time to time, but for the most part it's sometimes just easier to know where to look in the menu. Also, some of these items will give you, if you hover over it long enough, it'll give you kind of a demonstration of what it's doing. And then all of these also have the ability at any moment, if you're hovering over it, to press F1 and it'll take you to the basically the user guide that's online, or it should. Take you to the user guide online that would show you more information about that tool. I'm going to close out, well, before we close out, let me just talk about the browser real quick, because we'll get into this in the conceptual mass environment. Basically, to navigate around in Revit, right away you're in a 2D, in the project environment, you can see what's highlighted is level 1. That means we're in a floor plan view and we're looking at level 1. And so we're kind of in this 2D environment at the moment. But if you keep clicking, double clicking on each of these, you're switching views. And there's really nothing in the model at the moment, so it's not much to look at. But you also see down at the very bottom, there's a basically expandable part of the tree menu that's called families. And if you click on that, you'll see all the different types of families that are available. And of course, those have additional expandable points as well. But you can see this is where, as you build families and you load them into the project, they'll end up in this part of the tree menu. One thing I'm going to talk about real quick is I'm going to type in VG, V as in Victor, and G as in Gary. VG will take you to what's called visibility graphics, and you're going to notice that there's a thing in here called model categories, and then there's annotation categories, and there's all these tabs at the top, imported categories. Revit does not use layers. Layers are no longer around. AutoCAD and MicroStation and every other CAD system that's out there uses layers. The thing that is inefficient about layers is they're customizable. So if you're working with a group of people, everyone has their own way of naming things and putting lines on a particular layer and so forth. But the layers are a way of controlling the visibility of your CAD file excuse me, that you're viewing. So you all know that when you have your different layers, you can always turn them off or lock them, or start to view different things from time to time. In Revit, everything has its own category. So basically, when you insert a door is always going to be on the door category. So you'll see in the model categories, there's all these doors, floors, there's detail items, curtain wall mullions, and so forth. You can kind of look at all the different names. But everything that you make in Revit is associated with one of these categories. So when we're working in what we're going to be doing today, which is called the conceptual mass environment, if we were to bring that mass into the project environment, it will show up as a mass category, which means we can control its visibility through the mass category visibility graphics. So just keep that in mind, and the reason I bring that up is when we close out of this project, I'm going to go to this big R that's up to the top left, and I'm just going to hit close, and that will take me back to the recent file screen. If I were to click on new for families, you get this template file, or this dialog box that pops up that says it wants you to pick a particular template file to draw in. And you'll notice that if you look at the names of all of these templates, they look very similar to the names of the visibility graphics model categories. That means that in order to make a door that's in the door category, you have to start on the door family template. So when we're making new families, you have to really be conscious of what you're going to be making and what environment you need to be in. There are ways of changing it, but the point of that is a lot of these templates have different tool sets and different ways of adding parameters and different just ways of working that are specific to that particular category. That if you were, for instance, on a, let's say, a lighting category, you obviously can't just change that to a door because there's going to be a whole another set of parameters that are associated with lighting versus doors. You'll see in the middle here, there's a whole set of what's called generic model templates. That's where a lot of what we're going to be doing in the first part of the semester will be really working through the generic models. Those are basically any category that you can't fit whatever you're trying to do. If you can't find another template, it's, you know, whatever you're trying to make, it won't fit under the door. It's not a window, it's not a light. If you can't find a category for it, it becomes a generic model. I'm going to cancel out of that. And what we're going to do is go into the conceptual mass environment. With Revit, you can usually get into things multiple ways. The easiest way here is just go to New Conceptual Mass and click on it. You'll get this dialog box that pops up. Basically, all it's doing is telling you it's going to the family templates under the conceptual mass, and you're picking the only option that's there, which is called mass. And you're hitting open. And you'll notice that this starts to look a lot like Vasari if you were working on it. Maybe the colors are a little bit different, but it's the same exact environment. You've got your home tab. You have these drawing tools that are up here that basically you can draw lines, rectangles, polygons. You can do some fillets. You can do splines and you know, ellipses and so forth. And then you also have the point element. We're going to be using the point element quite a bit, but the point element does not show up in every family type. It's a conceptual mass tool and an adaptive component tool. So if you were to go into like a generic model, for instance, you'll have all of these other possibilities of drawing, but you won't have this point element. You also have components. You can load other families into other families, so you can have nested families. You can also have CAD files. We can import CAD. So if you needed to trace something for some reason, we can do that, but we're not going to go there today. You can also bring in images. Then under View, you have basically what is associated with the project browser. You have your camera views, your floor plan, switch windows, and then also you have the tile command and cascade and so forth. Every time you click on a view in the project browser, so if I just start clicking around in here, what's really happening is in the background, all of those windows are being opened at one time. So just be conscious of however many times, especially when your tree starts to get a lot of different views in it. If you were just clicking around in 100 different views, at some time you might have 100 windows open actually running in the background. And sometimes that's a problem depending on the computer you're in. So from time to time, if I have one of these expanded, you'll see there's this tool at the very top that's called Close Hidden Windows. So from time to time, just to clean up your environment, you can click on that and it'll close all the windows that are behind it. Also, if I happen to have all these views open, if I want to, instead of looking at it in a tile manner or cascaded or so forth, I could come up here to the very top and also use what's called switch windows. And if I click on that, every window that's open shows up in a menu. And so I can go through here and switch to the floor plan view or a 3D view or any of these other open windows that are in the background. For now, let's get into the 3D views and make sure you're in the one that has the brackets around it. This one that's called 3D View 1, I'm going to right click on it and just hit delete. The reason I'm doing that is because that's a perspective camera view, and if you ever accidentally go into that view, you'll find that a lot of tools don't work and you start to get frustrated because you're like, I know we did this in class and I can't get it to work. And that's probably because you're in that perspective view and a lot of tools aren't able to be used in that environment. The regular 3D view is just kind of your regular axonometric view. Some navigation items here, pretty similar to a lot of programs, but if you hold down the middle scroll button on your mouse, and you've got to make sure that if you're using your own computer that you have a 3-button mouse. That means you have your left button, right button, and the middle click on your scroll wheel. If you hold down the scroll, you should get this little move icon that pops up, and then I can pan around the environment. Then just like any other program, you've got your zoom in and zoom out with your scroll button. Left mouse click will select things. And just like in AutoCAD, if you hold in the left mouse button and window from left to right, basically anything that is contained within that window gets selected. And if you go the opposite direction from right to left, you get the dashed line, so anything that the window crosses will become selected. If you hold down the shift key and the right mouse button, you can rotate and orbit. You can also use the view cube off to the top right. If you hover over it, you can click on different corners of the view or the cube, and you get different views kind of in this one 3D mode. But it always kind of defaults to a particular angle. So if you're still trying to look at the project in a different angle, you're using the shift and then that right mouse button. So first thing I'm going to do is show you how to create a complex surface. And we're going to achieve this by just using the point command and the spline through points. So basically on the very bottom you've got the point on the far right and then spline through points on the bottom left.
How do I expand my toolbar like that? Mine are
Okay, if you happen to have a different layout of your tools on the screen, there's this little down arrow that's at the very top. If you click, this down arrow, this arrow. If you click on this, it'll cycle through different ways of viewing your menu. And so if you keep clicking, eventually you should get to this set of tools.
I do not have the draw portion under my modify tab, but I'm in 2010 right now. It's when I downloaded yesterday.
Okay, yeah, you might want to upgrade to 2012. I'm not sure. The conceptual mass environment came out in 2010.
Right.
So I'm not sure how much has been added to it since then.
All right.
So you should have the draw command once you start doing something. You might have it compressed. Let me look at that screen real quick. One thing to keep in mind is with your screen resolution, depending on your screen resolution, if you happen to have a lower resolution, this tool ribbon will adjust. So if I had a smaller screen for some reason, and this happens a lot when you're presenting, this is a good projector that we actually have high resolution, but some screens are only 1024 by 768 resolution when you're projecting. And whenever you're trying to teach, it's hard because all the stuff that ends up off the screen gets compressed into a kind of this one icon that has a little down arrow that then you can pick it. You've probably seen that in a lot of different programs, and then you kind of have to hunt for your command. So you may have that on your 2010 there, depending on your screen resolution. But we'll work through that. So essentially, what we're going to do here is I'm just going to place 3 points somewhere in space. I don't really care where they are. But if we left click on the point command, and everything in Revit, you always select the icon first and then you draw with it. I know there's some programs out there where you can do it both ways or opposite. But I'm just going to pick maybe 3 points in space. And to kind of stop the command, you can always go back to modify, the little icon at the top left, and hit the left mouse button. And when I rotate around, you'll see I've got my 3 points that were drawn, and they're probably all in line, because when you start to draw in 3D, it assumes a particular plane. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment, but if you select any of your any of your points, you get the kind of the 3D Studio Max and Maya crosshairs for objects that if I were to click on this, I can also left click and hold and drag any of these X, Y, and Z axes and move the object. So I'm just going to kind of move these around a little bit. Doesn't really matter where they are, but just try to get them out of line. And then I'm going to select each one. You can hold in the control key and you get the little plus icon with your mouse. And we can select all of these and then click on spline through points. So basically we get a line, a curve, that is going to go through all 3 points that we've placed. And it's going to go through the points in the order that you selected them, or it should. So just make sure you kind of get something that looks like an arc. Doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but something like that. Everyone get their arc through points. Now basically everything in Revit when you draw is going to be connected and have some form of connection to its parts. So since we've drawn these points first and then we drew a line that connects all 3 points, if we were to take one of these points and then move the line or the curve, that line is going to update in real time. And if you can't select a point, if you tab over, if you hover over it and then tab, the tab key will cycle through your possible selections. So from time to time you probably need to use that. And I can also look at this curve in a floor plan view. I can look at it in an elevation, so I could go to my north elevation, and I could also move the curve around, and if I go back to my 3D view, obviously the view updates. Even though these are floor plans, 3D views, and elevations, those are just views of the model, and so everything that you do in each of these views, whether it's in 2D or in the 3D environment or in the floor plan view, is always going to update in all the other different views. So it's pretty similar to a lot of your 3D programs. I'm going to take another set of points. I'm going to get this curve to look.
Can you ever move the point on the line itself?
Like up and down the line?
Like if you want it somewhere else on the line, can you move it, or is it like there?
You can, but it's by another set of parameters that we'll get to later.
Okay.
But like basically, it's going to always be at this point on this particular curve.
Okay.
Can you add more points to it to adjust it, or once it's drawn?
You can, no, you have to, let's see, if you right click. No, you always have to, basically, when you click on it, there's an option over here called dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
That will get rid of all the things that went through the points, and you'd have to add more points and then kind of recreate the curve. So I'm going to draw that one more time, and let's make 3 more points somewhere off into space. It doesn't matter where. And we're going to make another curve. And then I'm going to
Jeremy, did you just highlight those 3 points, or did you select them one at a time?
I did one at a time in order.
Oh, you just did it real quick?
Yeah. I can go back.
No, you don't have to, I'll just follow.
I don't know that I did do that though. It's interesting.
Possible to delete the line without deleting the points?
Yeah, if you click on it, hit dissolve at the top. you have to click on the line first to select it and then hit dissolve. Because they're all connected, if you were to click on the line itself, it will delete all the points. Control Z will undo that. So I need to make these points one more time.
It's really weird that it did that. And it's still like that. So that one's not.
Look at the,
Jeremy, what would make the axis thing not line up to the X, Y, and Z? Mine,
Yeah, that mine did
they're
that
yellow,
too.
and they're not in the right direction.
Mine was
So-
like that too. I mean, it still let me move and stuff, but it wasn't moving in the
Yeah,
right
mine's a little
direction.
yellow also.
one of my points was highlighted when I created those next 3 points.
Say that again?
One of the points was highlighted when I created the next 3 points instead of one of the initial planes. Does that make a difference when creating those next 3 points?
You mean like actually making the next point?
Yeah, like one of the initial points is like the little blue box was around one of those points instead of one of these down here.
Okay.
Does that make it? I was just wondering if that made a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me look at that in a minute. But basically what we want to do here is let's just create these curves that are next to each other. And what we're going to do is click on both of these. And because they're just wireframe curves, if we select both of them, you'll always get this option that's called Create Form. And we can create a solid form. I didn't like my section. Probably because this one's way too far away.
Mine won't do it, yeah. Yeah. Mine won't do it. But I think it's because it was the yellow thing. Okay, I did it. I just didn't second it.
So my curves were kind of out of whack a little bit. I just took one of mine and I copied it, so you can use the copy command. I just want to show you a quick example here because we need to get into parameters. But essentially, I went into my north elevation and I'm selecting this curve, and under modify at the top here, there's a copy command. And we just hit copy, and I'm just going to copy this off to the left, so that we have a couple different section curves. I didn't like the way my initial curves were set up. And if you select both of these and hit Create Form, you should get a complex surface, or this surface that's basically lofted together, kind of like in Rhino. When you hover over the curve, you will see that you start to get those points back. But if you don't see them, you can click on it, and there's an option up to the top right here called X-ray. If I click on X-ray, once I've selected this form, I can see all of my original points again.
Did we figure out what?
And my crosshairs are gone.
Yeah, somebody asked about the yellow. Yeah, I don't know. But I don't know if you know what was going on. I just don't understand why it's doing that.
It's the axis.
No, other people did it too, not just me. I'm curious why.
Got a fatal error.
I'm just curious why you did it.
Alright, my Revit closed out on me. I don't know why that happened.
Key example of why it is. Did you figure out why it came up yellow on ours? Or it came up again on here?
Yeah, if you're getting yellow on the surface, you know your view points, you were just asking how come they turned yellow instead of being with the coordinate axis. That's because once you draw a line through it, or you have a surface, it's actually showing you what's called surface normal. Does everyone know that when you draw a surface, okay, in the coordinate world, everything is X, Y, and Z. When you're on a surface, it's actually U, V, and surface normal. You'll probably notice, I don't know if you've used Rhino, but that terminology is in there, and we're going to see that when we start to divide a surface. There's what's called U divisions and V divisions. If you were to look at a surface, U is essentially considered the X on that surface, V is the Y, and surface normal is perpendicular out from that point. And so basically that yellow, that little orange, should be showing you a perpendicular to surface normal as your Z-axis somewhere.
Like that one?
So I need to start over. My Revit crashed for some reason. That shouldn't have crashed on something like that. But.
So I should have a blue one still, or is that just because yours is still straight up down? Blue, blue one. Yeah, I'm just curious. It's still
where it's located.
Yeah, it's still giving me what I assume to be right angles and stuff. So.
Mine are right angles too, but I guess it's in relation, like say, like in front. Like this is pointing straight down.
Yeah.
I don't know. What if you go in front on yours? Or just like
I'm working on it.
just click on this one. There.
It's not going anywhere.
All right, so there we go. I'm back. One thing with Revit, once you've done something that you like, you need to go ahead and do a save as. Because what just happened with me is I got a fatal error for some reason and it closed out. That usually has to do with graphic card problems. But to do a save as, you always go to this R at the top left. This is your applications menu. This will give you all the print, export, saves, and new and open. I'm going to do a save as, and it's a family. So we're going to say save as family, and I'm going to save it to, I'll just put it in my documents for now. But you should be saving it on your USB stick or whatever you have to work with. And I'm going to call this just in class curves for now. Basically, Revit does not have a autosave to it. So you have to get into the habit, kind of like in Rhino or even SketchUp, is when you get things accomplished or you've been working for a long time, always come back up here to the top left and you've got the little save icon and hit save as much as you can. The reason it doesn't have a auto save is that these files get really big and cumbersome, and on some of my models they might be 200 megabytes, and if you had to auto save every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you'd pretty much have to walk away from your computer every now and then for every little auto save. So basically you just want to save when you can. So basically what I'm showing you here is once you get this form, you can click on and you can tab over the surface. I can click on the surface and I get the yellow. You can see I've got the different ability to move this object around because I actually clicked on the surface. If I were to click on a curve, I can move that up and down, and you see that your surface is constantly updating. So I can stretch it out, I can move it over, move it up, and the surface is always connected. I can click on this and click on X-ray up at the very top right, and this will show you all of your points that created that surface. So then I can select each individual point and also further manipulate the surface as well.
Where did you say that X-ray one?
You have to select your any kind of object first, and then you get these extra palette of options that pop up.
Mine's not giving me the arrows when I select them.
Your arrows go away.
Yeah.
You just have to go back from X-ray and have them go back into the X-ray and go do it again.
You just toggled the X-ray and then it.
And then,
yeah. Sometimes these 3D views get kind of corrupt from time to time, and when I mean corrupt, it's all of a sudden you're like that, ability to select your point and move them, it goes away. And what you guys are just saying is if you toggle the X-ray back and forth, it should bring it back. It's kind of refreshing the screen. It's not really that clunky, but all right. So just real quick, Revit essentially, and you probably have done this in Vasari. In Vasari, I could draw. I'm just drawing a rectangle, and if you hit create form, it creates a box, and it kind of makes this extrusion that you can move up and down and so on. But even though we're creating a form, it says create form, and then the options are solid form and void forms. Even though we've selected each of these curves and it made a surface, Revit still considers that a solid. So just be aware that you are actually still making a solid, even though it's just a plain kind of paper thin surface, just for terminology reasons. I'm going to delete my little box. That's not important at the moment. Let's go ahead and delete all of this, and let's talk about parameters a little bit. So basically, when you create those two curves, and we've got 3 points associated with the curves, you can see how you can dynamically manipulate the surface, and everything changes as you manipulate the surface. So I can move that point, I can move the curve, I can move the surface, and I can stretch it. I can do all those things, and that surface is constantly going to update. But that's kind of an intuitive way of working, and it's a one-off type of item. One thing that we get into in Revit is everything within the program and within BIM has some kind of parametric quality to it or component. And in order to create a parametric item, we have to assign parameters to it. We have to understand what parametric means. We have to know what a parameter is, and then we have to know how to apply it and what the rules are of how we want to manipulate and use it. Essentially, when you're making a family, the point of making a family is to make one item that can be manipulated parametrically, and you bring that into your project environment so that you don't have to make the surface 10 different times if you want to come up with 10 different iterations. You're just merely changing the parameters. Same thing with these curves. In order to make this solid, I made 2 curves, and it has 3 points associated with each one, but I could have made those 2 curves with the same curve if I implement parametric data into each of those points. So that's what we're going to go over right now, and then show you how to bring in those curves parametrically and change them and then make that surface again. So everyone should be back in the conceptual mass environment. We've just deleted everything. And I'm going to create those 3 points one more time. I'm just going to put them off into space. Actually, I'm going to delete those. Let's go in the floor plan view, level 1. This crosshairs, this is your insertion point for this particular family. This is considered 0, 0, 0. This is your Y and this is your X. I'm going to just place a couple of my curves or my points, at least one on one side of the X and at least another one on the other, the north side. I go into my 3D view. They're all going to be kind of in this floor plan. They're all going to be on the same plane. I'm going to then take them and just kind of move them in different positions in the Z-axis. There's no rhyme or reason to this. I'm just moving these around a little bit. You'll notice that when you click on a point, you get these blue dimensions that pop up. Anything in Revit that is blue is called a temporary dimension. You can click on the text. If you left click on it, you get the number pops up, whatever it happened to read. And I could type in 140 feet in my case, and that point is going to move 140 feet to be that distance from this particular plane that's off of 0. So you can also move things around by messing with those dimensions a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit more. But if you click on each of these points, click on each one and make sure they're all selected. Look off to the left under your properties palette. You'll see that there is a set of properties associated with these reference points. There's flipped, mirrored, there's a rotation angle, and then there's these things called graphics. We have a show reference and it's set to never. If you click in the white space next to never, you should get this down arrow that pops up. And then you've got never, when selected, and always. Go ahead and select always. You'll get these X, Y, and Z planes that pop up with each point. These are the reference points, or the reference planes that are associated with the reference point. What these are, give you the ability to actually make dimensions from another parallel component. So for instance, this axis or this work plane that's in the Y, we could take a dimension from here and then select the other parallel plane to actually get a hard dimension. And what we need to do in order to start setting up parameters is we need to dimension, and I'm just going to go into a floor plan view because sometimes dimensioning is easier in 2D. I'm going to click on this measure tool, and it's not the one that's called measure between two references, it's the one called aligned dimensions. You can get to it in a couple different ways.